Something broke in your house recently, maybe a washing machine, maybe a coffee maker, and you did what people have always done. You tried to fix it, or at least thought about trying. Then you discovered that the screws require a proprietary bit you do not own, or the part that failed is not sold separately. The worst is when the manufacturer's website tells you to contact an authorized service center where the repair estimate is 70% the price of a new one. So you threw it away and bought a replacement. Not because you wanted to, not because you are wasteful, but because somewhere between wanting to fix it and actually fixing it, every possible path led to the same place. Just buy a new one. The narrative you hear is that people lost the skills, that we have become a throwaway culture, that nobody values craftsmanship or self-reliance anymore. But that has it exactly backwards. Your grandparents did not fix things because they were more virtuous. They fixed things because the things they owned were built to be fixed. What changed is not the people. What changed is everything around them. And it did not change by accident. Some of you watching this remember appliances differently, and the reason you remember them differently is because they were different. A washing machine from the 1980s had a motor, a belt, a pump, a timer, and a handful of mechanical parts, any of which could be identified, removed, and replaced with a standard wrench and a parts diagram that came in the owner's manual. The manual itself included exploded diagrams showing every component and how it fit together, because the manufacturer assumed you might open it. The assumption was baked into the product: this machine belongs to you, and you might need to fix it, so here's how everything works. A washing machine built today has a sealed control board, a proprietary motor assembly, sensors connected by ribbon cables, and a housing held together with clips designed to break if you try to separate them. The manual, if one exists at all, tells you to contact a service professional. The exploded diagram is gone. The assumption baked into this product is the opposite of its predecessor. You will never open this machine, and if you do, you are on your own. This shift was not a side effect of better technology. Complexity does not require non-modularity. The electronics in a modern appliance could be built with modular, replaceable components, standard connectors, and accessible layouts. Many were, in the early years of digital appliance design. The move toward sealed, glued, non-modular construction was a deliberate choice, driven by manufacturing cost reduction and by a simple economic truth that reshaped the entire industry. A customer who repairs is a customer who does not repurchase. The pattern is even more aggressive in consumer electronics. Phones with batteries glued in place, so removal requires a heat gun and a pry tool. Wireless earbuds sealed in epoxy with no serviceable components whatsoever, meaning that when the battery degrades, and every battery eventually degrades, the product becomes garbage. Printers with chips on the ink cartridges that refuse to print when a preset page count is reached, even when ink remains inside. The design philosophy shifted from this product should last and be maintained to this product should function until it does not, at which point you should buy the next one. And once the products were sealed shut, the next layer of the problem locked into place, because even when someone had the skill and willingness to fix something, the parts started disappearing. Manufacturers increasingly restrict the availability of replacement components. Some do not sell parts to consumers at all, only to authorized service centers. Some sell parts at prices so inflated that the repair costs more than replacement. Some discontinue parts within a few years of a product's release, making repair physically impossible, regardless of how skilled you are or how willing you are to do the work. The contrast with an earlier era is striking. Auto parts stores used to stock components for vehicles going back decades. Hardware stores carried universal belts, gaskets, switches, and fittings that worked across multiple brands and models because products were built around common specifications. A broken dryer belt did not require a manufacturer-specific part number and a 2-week shipping window. You drove to the hardware store, matched the belt by size, and had the dryer running by dinner. Standardization was the foundation that repairability was built on. When a washing machine pump, a refrigerator thermostat, or a furnace igniter used common specifications, any competent repair person could source a replacement from multiple suppliers at competitive prices. The entire ecosystem of repair, from the corner shop to the independent technician to the handy neighbor, depended on parts being available, affordable, and interchangeable. The move toward proprietary components dismantled that foundation. The repair is difficult because the supply chain was closed on purpose. Products were sealed and parts were locked away, but it gets worse. Even if you manage to open the product and source the part, there is another layer most people do not fully see yet, and it changes what ownership actually means. Modern products increasingly contain software that controls whether replacement parts function, even when the parts are physically identical to the originals. Replace a cracked phone screen with an identical third-party screen, and the phone software may disable the touchscreen, dim the display, or show a permanent warning notification that never goes away. Replace a component on a tractor, and the onboard computer may refuse to start the engine until a dealer technician connects their proprietary diagnostic tool and authorizes the new part in the system. Replace a printer cartridge with a compatible third-party cartridge, and the firmware may reject it entirely, displaying an error message on a printer that is mechanically ready to print. The product recognizes that the part was not installed through an authorized channel and punishes you for the repair. This is called parts pairing, and it is spreading across industries from phones to farm equipment to medical devices to home appliances. This is where the concept of ownership is quietly redefined without anyone signing a new agreement. You bought the product, you possess it, it sits in your house. But the manufacturer retains control over what happens inside it through software that dictates which components are allowed to function. You are not an owner in any traditional sense of the word. You are closer to a licensed user of a physical object, and the license terms are set by the manufacturer, changeable at any time through a firmware update you may not have noticed downloading. Farmers understand this problem better than anyone because they've been fighting it longer. Farmers who have repaired their own equipment for generations are now locked out of their own machines by diagnostic software that requires dealer authorization to clear error codes after a routine repair. Someone who can weld a frame, rebuild a diesel engine, and replace a hydraulic line cannot get their own tractor to start after fixing it, because the computer will not allow it without a dealer visit that costs hundreds of dollars and may require waiting days during a harvest window, where every day of downtime means lost income. The right to repair something you own, a concept so fundamental to ownership that it was never questioned for the entire history of manufactured goods, now requires legislation to restore. That sentence alone should tell you how far the shift has gone. Now, let's say you don't want to self-repair, but just want a quick in-person solution. The places where repair used to happen have largely vanished. Every mid-sized town used to have a TV repair shop, a vacuum cleaner repair shop, a small engine mechanic, a cobbler, and other small repair services. These were not quaint holdovers from an older era. They were a functioning economic layer that kept products in use, kept money circulating locally, and kept the knowledge of how things work alive in the community. Those businesses died in a cascade. As products became harder to fix and parts became harder to source, each repair job took longer and cost more. As repair costs approached replacement costs, fewer customers chose repair. As volume dropped, repair shops could not cover rent. As shops closed, the next person who wanted something fixed had nowhere to go, which pushed them toward replacement, which reduced demand further, which closed more shops. The repair economy did not die of natural causes. It was starved by every upstream decision that made repair less viable. The closure of repair shops also severed the apprenticeship pipeline. Repair is a skilled trade learned by doing, by standing next to someone who knows how and watching them diagnose, disassemble, and rebuild. When the shops closed, that knowledge transfer stopped. The generation that could identify a failing capacitor by sound, resolder a cracked joint on a circuit board, or rebuild a small engine from memory is aging out, and there is no next generation behind them because there is no place to learn and no economic model that supports the work. The same thing happened in schools. Shop class, home economics, and auto mechanics, the courses that taught practical repair and maintenance skills, were systematically cut from public school curricula over the past 3 decades, replaced by college prep academics under the assumption that everyone would work in offices and nobody would need to know how physical things work. A generation was told they were not handy, when the truth is they were never given the opportunity to learn, and the infrastructure that would have taught them was dismantled at the same time as the products that would have given them something to practice on. And holding all of these layers together is the final mechanism, the one that makes throwing things away feel like the rational choice, even when it is not. A washing machine repair might cost $200. A new washing machine costs $500. The repair looks expensive at 40% of replacement cost, and most people stop the calculation right there. But the repaired machine might run another 8 to 10 years, while the new machine is built to the same planned lifespan as the one it is replacing, meaning you will face the exact same decision again in 8 to 10 years. Over a 20-year window, the person who repairs spends $700 on one machine. The person who replaces spends $1,000 or more on 2. The repair was the better financial decision, but it never feels that way in the moment because the comparison is always framed as repair cost versus new product price, not as lifetime cost of ownership. That framing is not accidental. The entire retail and manufacturing ecosystem is built to make replacement feel like the smart choice. Financing plans break the price of a new product into small monthly payments so the total cost becomes invisible. Trade-in programs give your broken product a token credit toward its replacement. Sales events are timed to align with the typical failure window of the previous generation. Extended warranties cost nearly as much as a repair and often cover less than you would expect, and the cost that never enters anyone's math is the environmental one. Millions of tons of appliances, electronics, and consumer goods enter landfills every year, many of them with a single failed component that could have been replaced for a fraction of the product's cost. The rare earth minerals in a discarded phone, the steel in a junked washing machine, the copper wiring in a scrapped refrigerator, none of it is priced into the moment a consumer decides that replacing is easier than repairing. The planet absorbs the cost of a business model designed to generate repeat purchases, and the consumer never sees that line item. Now here's where the argument that this is just how modern technology works falls apart, because other countries looked at the same problem and decided to fix it. The EU passed right to repair legislation requiring manufacturers to make spare parts available for up to 10 years after a product is discontinued, to design products that can be disassembled with commonly available tools, and to provide repair information to independent repair shops and consumers. France went further and implemented a repairability index, a score displayed on products at the point of sale that tells you before you buy how easy or difficult a product will be to fix. You can stand in a store and see a number on the shelf telling you whether the item was designed to be repaired or designed to be thrown away, and you make your decision with that information visible. Several American states have passed or are advancing right-to-repair legislation, and the movement gained significant traction, partly through the farm equipment fight, where the image of a farmer locked out of their own tractor by software was compelling enough to cross political lines. But industry opposition remains enormous. Manufacturer lobbying groups argue that open repair access compromises product safety, undermines quality assurance, and threatens intellectual property. These are functionally the same arguments the auto industry made a century ago when independent mechanics started servicing vehicles that manufacturers wanted serviced only at their own dealerships. The auto industry lost that fight, and the result was a thriving independent repair ecosystem that kept cars on the road for decades. The question is whether today's manufacturers will lose the same fight, or whether the combination of software locks, proprietary parts, and sealed construction will become so entrenched that legislation arrives too late to unwind it. If you're noticing things in this video that were always right in front of you, that's what this channel does. Subscribe if you want to keep looking closer. Nobody stopped fixing things because they stopped caring. Products were deliberately sealed, parts restricted, and software licenses replaced true ownership, slowly choking repair shops and eliminating the skills pipeline that once sustained them. At the same time, Economic incentives were structured so that replacing things seems smarter than repairing them, even when long-term math proves otherwise. So here's the question. If the products were designed to be opened, the parts were available, the software allowed it, the repair shops existed, the schools taught the skills, and the economics reflected the true lifetime cost, would people still choose to throw things away? Drop your answer in the comments, because every appliance in a landfill with one broken part is proof that this was never about what people wanted. It was about what they were allowed to do with the things they paid for.